Have you ever listened to a piece of solo guitar music and thought to yourself that it sounded like more than one guitar was playing? How do composers achieve this effect in their music, and how do we as guitarists make this effect come to life? Well, the first step is understanding what exactly this effect is and how composers use a sort of unique notation to communicate to the performer how to make it happen. Let's begin by taking a look at a piece of music where it definitely might sound like two guitars are playing, the Bourrée from the First Lute Suite by Johann Sebastian Bach. One thing you might recognize is that not only does it sound like two guitars are playing, but if you look at the score, it actually looks like the music follows two distinct lines, one following the notes with the stems going up, and one following the notes with the stems going down. In fact, if you were to play these lines on their own, you notice that these melodies sound pretty satisfying and independent on their own. When two or more musical lines occur simultaneously, the result is a texture known as polyphony, which comes from the Greek for many voices. In fact, when we talk about these melodic lines, we often describe them as voices, maybe taken from the fact that polyphony's historical origins happened in choral music where each line was sung. If you've ever sung in choir, you might recognize that voices are often categorized into the letters SATB, soprano and alto for the higher female voices, and tenor and bass for the lower male voices. In guitar music, we often use the same terminology to identify the different range of voices occurring in a polyphonic work. We typically call the highest voice the soprano and the lowest voice the bass. J.S. Bach, for example, wrote in a style of polyphony called counterpoint, which puts a special emphasis on the equality of musical voices. Some of Bach's most complex music on the guitar comes when an additional voice is added between the soprano and bass, resulting in three distinct musical lines happening at the same time. In the scores for these pieces, you'll notice that in addition to the soprano and bass voices that are distinguished by stem up and stem down, there's an extra voice in the middle that has its own set of rhythmic values. In pieces like this, the guitarist's goal is to make it sound like three guitars are playing at the same time by making each voice sound as lyrical and connected as possible, like a singing voice. The best way to do this is to make sure that the rhythmic value of each individual note is being observed as accurately as possible in its complete duration. But polyphony isn't just unique to Bach. In fact, most pieces for the classical guitar have some distinguishable voices that can make a work sound multidimensional. Let's take a look at an etude by Matteo Carcassi, his Opus 60, number 3 in A major. The basic notation shows the fundamental technique that drives this piece, a straightforward right-hand arpeggio. But this actually isn't what Carcassi notated. This is what Carcassi notated. Looking at this score, you'll notice some strange quirks. For instance, we have a dotted half note head placed in a position where it seems like a regular blacked out eighth note head should go. Not only that, but we have stems going in opposite directions. And then following this, we see these stems going in opposite directions occurring on beats 2, 3, and 4. It sort of seems like even though this piece revolves around a basic arpeggio pattern, Carcassi was intending this work to sound like multiple voices were occurring, just like in the Bach. In fact, if we follow the stem directions and identify the musical voices at work, we do find specific musical lines occurring. The result of thinking about music in this way is that we create music that is multi-dimensional, with clear foreground and background. Instead of just playing a simple arpeggio pattern, we've now created music where it sounds like more than one guitarist is playing.
To study the free stroke, I will separate the movements in three parts. So first of all, the finger will touch the string, will push the string, the second movement, and the third will release. Okay, so the direction of the finger will go all the way to your palm, in this direction. Okay, so first, touching the string, pushing the strings towards inside the guitar, and then release of the movement. So this will be 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, the idea is to make this all in ones. Perfect. Now we can do this kind of exercise with all the different fingers. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And then 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Please note that the finger is going in this direction. So in that way, we will move from this part of the finger. Yeah. So this is it. But then I like to alternate fingers. So the idea is to, when one finger is moving, the other is preparing. So we start doing this kind of walking. And then we can also do the same with other two fingers, with M and A. Okay, now I would like to train two fingers at the same time. This. And then we will alternate I finger and M finger, afterwards M and A. So let's do first I and M. Let's try to play this really together. Remembering the direction of the movement. So it's like if you wanted to touch this part of the hand. And afterwards we can do the three fingers. After, we can try to add the thumb. So how is the direction of the thumb? The thumb will do this kind of movement. So in this way, we can start practicing, I don't know, with any chord you have here. And remembering always to practice this movement. Okay, so one exercise is to do this a simple stroke. The next step will be like to double these movements like this. Etc. And then we do three strokes. Afterwards, we do 4. Okay.
I'm here to talk about some basic left-hand technique ideas that have really made a big difference in my playing, and hopefully they're useful for you too. Today we're going to talk about sort of alignment of our left hand, where to generate force from, and exactly how much force we need. So when I say alignment, I'm really talking about how to position our left hand. You may recall from some other episodes that our right hand needs to be sort of concave, natural curl of the fingers, and we move from these large knuckles. The left hand, even though we're doing a very different thing technically, it's a very similar concept. We want the hand to be concave, and we want the fingers to be curled naturally, and we're generating the motion this way, once again. So we're not squeezing, we're not sort of pushing with these little tiny middle joints and tip joints. We're mostly generating force from right here. So the first thing I'm going to do, actually before I do my first drill, just some little review points that I'm sure you know already. When we come down in the string, we want to come down vertically so that we're not touching the other adjacent strings. And also we want to aim next to the fret. If we don't press right on the fret, or sorry, next to the fret, we might get a buzz. There's that sweet spot that I'm sure your teachers all told you about. So the first thing I'm going to do is sort of a fun little exercise that I like to call target practice, in which we're really just one finger at a time, focusing on generating the force from this knuckle, and we're going to sort of try to smack it down on that sweet spot with the tip of our finger right next to the fret. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. You can see what I'm doing. My fingers are curled. I'm trying to keep all that stuff in mind that I was just talking about. Fingers curled, hand is concave, moving from here. The knuckles are not breaking, I'm not squeezing. My thumb is there. I'm going to talk more about the thumb in the future. My thumb is there, but not squeezing. It's just sort of touching for a bit of support. And I'm really just practicing my aim. The right hand isn't involved, so I can really focus on hitting that sweet spot. You'll notice it's a little tougher with the third and fourth fingers, but use your eyes. Try to keep the motion minimal, although, you know, if you have to sort of come out a little bit in order to engage this, that's okay for now. We can reduce the sort of space a little later, get more economic. But for now, just really focus on engaging that muscle. Target practice. Okay. Next thing I like to do, that to really, once again, same sort of idea. What we're doing now is we're increasing awareness in each of our 4 fingers of how to engage this big knuckle. This is a trick from David Leisner, his book Playing with Ease. He showed this to me and it really made a huge difference in my playing. He calls it finger push-ups. That's exactly what I'm doing. I'm playing one finger here on the 5th fret, pushing into the fretboard and away. Second finger, into the fretboard and away. Third, in and away. Fourth, in and away. Just like when you do a push-up, you push sort of into the ground and away at the same time. This, once again, is an exaggerated motion. We wouldn't really do this in a piece. You're not going to see many guitarists playing like this. But what it's doing is, once again, it's activating, okay, I really need to sort of use this in order to push in and away. So you're now getting used to that feeling. And when we play actual music, we're going to do sort of the same motion, but we just don't finish. We start the push-up until our finger is in the nice, comfortable, curled position, but we don't push, we don't finish the push-up, because we don't need to. We don't need that much force. Talk more about that later. Good. So now you have target practice and some push-ups. You're taking this guy to the gym. It's the first thing we're going to do. Now let's go to a basic first position chromatic scale and add the right hand. We're going to sort of do some note exchanges. This is a little exercise from Scott Tennant's Pumping Nylon of 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm trying to do the same thing I did with target practice. Make sure I'm pressing the notes down, generating the force from right here. But I'm also only doing it one finger at a time. You may have practiced chromatic scales leaving the fingers down, which is very beneficial for some other different techniques. But for now, just sort of play the notes one at a time, really focusing on that smooth exchange between one and the other. You can really work on synchronizing the change, one pressing, the other one lifting. The analogy I like to use with my students is it's almost like a trampoline. Just say, this guy's sitting on a trampoline and then a much bigger person comes, jumps, sends him flying, okay? This is going to really keep your hand light and keep your two hands synchronized. Once again, we're just sort of doing the same concept I was doing right here with the target practice, just making it a little more musical by adding the right hand and playing a line. Okay, so now we have sort of alignment of our hand, how to position it, where to generate force from, how much force do we need? The answer is very little. If you go to the first fret here and just gradually add pressure until it buzzes, okay, we don't want that, add a tiny bit more, there. I'm already realizing that I'm pressing quite a bit softer than I was even 30 seconds ago. So you can do this, again, with your chromatic exercise, just to get used to the feeling of how much pressure you actually need. And it's not very much. Okay? So hopefully you understood these ideas. I don't have time to sort of walk you through going up and down the chromatic exercise, but the important thing is that you just keep in mind all the things I was talking about. The alignment, make sure your hand is curled like this. You're always, whether you're doing the target practice, push-ups, regular one finger at a time chromatic exercise, or the buzzing chromatic exercise, always generating from here. So it's a lot of little drills, a lot to remember, but still that's the one overarching concept for today. So hopefully, even with the different variations, it's not too much and you can really stick this in there. Okay, that's all for today. See you next time.
So I'm here to do some sessions on chord playing with you. So today we're going to focus on some basic chords, 6 basic chords. If you've been playing for a while, you probably know lots of different chords. You know, some chords are harder than others to play. You know that there's different ways to play the same chord. You can play a C chord in lots of different places on the guitar. Different ways to play chords. That's maybe a whole other session as I go through some of these chords. If you see me playing them slightly differently from the way you play them, don't worry too much. What I'm here to talk about is just a little bit of kind of left-hand technique around chords. The stuff that we'll be talking about are the things that you can really apply to any chord changes, not just the ones I'm playing today or the chords that I'm talking about today. Then we're also going to talk a little bit about functional harmony around these 6 particular chords. You know this if you've been playing pop stuff or even if you've been playing classical, popular music, jazz. It's all the kind of the harmonic languages, fundamentally all the same, at least which chords are used and how they go together. So knowing a little bit about kind of the theory behind the chords and what chords to anticipate coming together in groups, which you've probably seen, especially in pop songs, it's all the same stuff over and over when it comes to chord playing. When you know a little bit about that, it helps you learn, I should say. It helps us learn about what to anticipate, what to expect. So, within that being said, the chords that we are working on today, we're going to work with our C major, our D minor, our E minor, F major, G major, and then A minor. So, we're going to call those either C, D minor, E, F, G, A minor, or we could call those in music theory the 1 chord, the 2 chord, the 3 chord, the 4 chord, the 5 chord, the 6 chord. So we'll come back to that concept in a minute. Let's just get down to real basics with those chords. How comfortable are you playing them? We know that within those chords, probably the A minor and the E minor, not too tricky. The C major, a bit tricky. It's a bit of a stretch. The G major, a bit tricky, a bit of a stretch. The F major, forget about it, right? Really tricky. There's a few different ways to play an F. You might play it a way that I teach a lot of my beginner students. An F chord is a 3-finger F. Just that. And then not worrying too much about what happens with the first string. Either letting it ring open or letting kind of the backside of your first finger touch that string. That's your F chord. You might have also learned with your F chord, 2 fingers here and then stretch across with your second and your third finger. You might even have gotten into playing bar chords. Oof, that's a lesson in itself. Big bar here and then third, fourth, second finger. So point being is figure out whichever one works for you at the moment, whichever one fits under your hand. So that F chord's the tricky one. So going back though, what I'm doing here is I'm keep going through those chords in a particular order. C chord, the D minor chord, that's the other one I didn't talk about. The D minor, not too tricky, but again there you might find you play it with your first, second and third fingers or first, second and fourth finger. My fourth finger's very short and it tucks in quite nicely there. So again, going back to that order that I'm playing them in. C major, D minor, then E minor, then F major, then G major, then the A minor, and then back to the C. Now the one thing while we're here talking about chords, one thing I am doing here is, or the one thing we need to talk about, thumb. So if you've played any classical guitar, you know that thumb behind the fingers is really kind of the way to go. We are blessed with opposable thumbs, and the way our hand works the best is typically the way our fingers work the best is when your thumb is behind your fingers supporting. You can stretch better that way and you can press better that way. And as guitarists, that's what we do, right? We stretch and we press. So a lot of times you hear kind of about left hand technique, making sure your thumb is right in the middle of the back of the neck of the guitar. Now, when it comes to playing chords, of course, you'll see, especially pop guitarists, the thumb sometimes comes around and muffles strings. So especially when I'm playing the D minor chord, my thumb might come up and over. Or even some guitarists, I don't do this much, you can literally fret chords with your thumb. Those are really important skills to learn, but they're very much based on, my feeling is, get control of your thumb to start with. So make sure that your thumb always sits in the back of the neck of the guitar. You can kind of move it around behind the different fingers, but try not to be literally kind of just absolutely gripping that neck to start with. So your practice out of these, going back to those 6 chords, make sure you're as comfortable as possible with your C major, with your D minor, with your E minor, with your F major, with your G major, and then with an A minor, back to the C major. Playing them in that particular order. One last thing then to do is put some real simple concept of rhythm in it. So I'm going to do that same thing, but I'm going to count 4 beats between each. 1, 2, 3, 4. D minor, 2, 3, 4. E minor, 2, 3, 4. F, 2, 3, 4. G, 2, 3, 4. A minor, and back to C. So there's your little exercise to just recap those chords, make sure some things to practice. Have a practice of that, and then we will move on to the next session where we talk about making sure that you know how to practice those chords. Happy practicing. Bye.